Welcome back to Small Caps, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kerry Stevenson. Today, I'm speaking with Rob McEwen. He is the executive chairman of McEwen Mining, listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker code of MUX. Now, McEwen Mining, of which Mr. McEwen is a 17% owner, they have 3 producing mines in Nevada, in Argentina, and I think Ontario, if I got it right. And
you have it right.
68% interest in a very large copper project in Argentina called Los Azules, again, if I got that right. But Rob, you've been associated with this industry all of your career, the first 18 years in the investment side, and my favorite subject, a lot in the gold industry. So you were the founder of Goldcorp, and you took that from a $50 million market cap to an $8 billion. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, 50 million to 8 billion. So one of the things I love about Rob as well is he is a student of economic history. And we have a lot of lessons that we still haven't learned. So Rob, great to see you. Thanks for joining me on Small Caps today.
Pleasure to be on, Kerry. Thank you.
Let's start off with what sparked your interest in mining in the first place? What attracted you to the industry?
Well, I'll start with gold. My father was an investment dealer, and in the mid-60s, he looked at the flow of funds and how countries were debasing their currencies. And he started putting all his clients into gold bullion, South African gold mining shares, Canadian gold mining shares, as a way to combat inflation. So around the dining room table, there were many conversations about the role of gold and gold shares. Then, I guess, after a first-year university, I worked once this summer in a base metal mine in northern Canada. And I said, well, no, thanks. I'm not going to be in the mining industry. That's I appreciate the offer, but that's not where I'm going. And then when I graduated, I did a lot of research in precious metals and then sales and portfolio management. And over that period of 18 years, I met a number of people that had dreams, and they came in saying, we've got this and it could become that. And it did, in many cases, become something, a discovery. So I got the bug and said, well, let's see if I could get into that same jet stream that some of those people are getting into. And I jumped into a hostile takeover battle as a white knight and bought control, ended up successfully beating the hostile and ending up with control of 2 mining companies. And then over 8 years, took 5 companies I had in a chain and compressed them into Goldcorp. And then when I got in there, I went, this industry, it could use a little in rejuvenation and some innovation.
Right.
So from there, I just questioned why we were doing things in a certain way. And when you question, you develop alternatives. And I found this is an industry that's very critical to society in many ways, providing the raw materials to allow modern society to go forward. But it also creates bursts of wealth that spread out across society. And I found that it's given me an avenue, myself and my wife, to support a number of areas where we saw needs in society that it gives a whole different equation to a bank account. It gives an emotion that...
Absolutely. And I want to come into what you and Cheryl have done in terms of the philanthropy side of things. But if we can just stay with Goldcorp for a moment, because you mentioned that you had to make some changes, implemented some innovation. That was a little while ago. Is that what made the big change, that sort of looking at it from, I guess, a new perspective? Do you think the mining industry is still able to do that, or are we stuck still not using enough innovation and technology?
I don't think it's a matter of if we can, I think it's more a question of we must.
Yeah.
That I gave a speech a week or two ago to the SME, the Mining Association, and my title was basically prosperity or extinction.
Yeah.
And I just think we have to look at the mining industry and see how we can improve its public image, not only to gain acceptance for bringing mines into production, but to convince the talent, the young talent that's going through schools, that this is a place they should be looking for employment because it's using technology. It's we need their energy, we need their passion, we need their talents to transform the industry. Because right now the numbers are declining very rapidly. I don't know about Australia, but if
I'd say
I was looking at numbers in the US in 1970 to 2020, enrollment in schools of geology and mine engineering dropped by 83%. Not quite as serious in Canada, but well over 60% drop. And you just say, well, we've got at the young age coming in, we're losing that talent because they're avoiding it.
Yep.
And at the other end, there's 10 to 15% of the workforce nearing retirement. So you've got this compression of the workforce at a time when world population is growing and urbanization and electrification is looking, we're going to have deficits in all sorts of metals. How are we going to produce that to stop us from going backwards into the Middle Ages?
You're absolutely right. And it's something that I think deeply about as well, Rob. But how do we better communicate it? Because, look, let's face it, Rob, we're against, sorry, mainstream media, but you don't communicate very well. And what we hear all the time is mining is bad. Even the governments are turning around and saying dirty, horrible mining. There's this massive disconnect, isn't there, between this green revolution, which is being mandated, and we have to have all these electric vehicles. Well, how do you think electric vehicles are going to be powered? You know, where are these cars going to come from? There's this disconnect. I think that people think that they come off the shelf of the supermarket or something. But how can we change this perception, Rob? It's a big, big ask.
Well, if you look at the world and say, a lot of the world doesn't think mining is even continuing today. And those that do know that mining goes on, most of them hate us.
Yeah.
So how do you change that? And I think it's very much like the story of Uber. So taxis were dirty, smelly, drivers were rude, cars were in poor repair, and there was no one you could go to get recourse if you had a complaint. Uber comes along and addresses all of those issues, makes it easy to get a car. You know when they're going to come. The fare's determined. And they decimated the taxi industry. So how do we Uberize the mining industry? We're looking at the complaints that are out there and saying, well, how are we addressing those? And then getting out and not speaking just within our industry, but speaking broadly and showing examples of how we've changed. And there are a number of good examples of people doing reclamation and restoring the natural habitat, improving the natural habitat. But we need to get that out in front more. I'm going to digress a moment, but
that's fine.
We have a large copper project in Argentina.
Yeah.
And it's the 9th largest undeveloped copper deposit in the world right now. And so we're looking at that, and a year and a half ago, we were having started meetings on how we progress this project. And I brought in an architect who's very prominent in the green living sustainable building space.
Oh.
And he's considered the Steve Jobs of the green building movement. And I said, how do we redefine mining? Can you help us redefine mining? And so where do we get our reduce our water usage consumption dramatically, reduce our carbon, and get to almost a zero input. And how do we make a place that is attractive to work, that someone want to go there? That is, and so we have some beautiful renderings right now of terraced residences under a glass roof that's solar powered, that's sustainable by water. It grows its own food. You have hanging gardens, almost like Babylon, in the residence. And it's really, it's really quite something if you say, you can go to this work camp and we're taking care of your health. It's at altitude, so we're making sure you're not being affected by lack of oxygen. And you just move the whole operation in a totally different direction, and looking for guidance from people who are at the forefront of these movements rather than trying to catch up. And I think if more of the industry could look that way, I think there's also, if you move in that direction, PricewaterhouseCoopers, the accounting firm, I saw a number recently, and they suggested that there was over $20 trillion invested in ESG investments around the world. And so I went, now, wait a minute, could we get some of that money? Could we be entering into a period where the mining industry has the lowest cost of capital in their lifetime? That if the mining industries move and shift, that they could be the recipients of some of that huge amount of money that's sitting out there. And so
but by that huge, sorry to interrupt you, Rob, by that huge amount of money that's sitting out there, you mean government funding that 20 trillion?
No, these are funds that are investing in ESG concepts. I mean, they're trying to brand it and all of that, but I mean, we should be a first mover, not a forced mover.
I understand what you're saying, and quite frankly, I want to come and be at your copper mine in the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, but there's a cost of mining, and I assume there's a cost of bringing in all of this wonderful environment that we want to look like. I know that you mentioned it before about SpaceX being this clean, wonderful environment and getting into that sort of area, but that's all well and good. But with the cost of mining, wouldn't that just bring yet another level of costs and possibly blow everything out of the water and make it uneconomic?
Well, it might be the cost of continuing.
Okay.
You might, I mean, you want to attract the youth, you want to attract the talent, you want to retain it after you've attracted it. You want the public to say, yes, please go ahead, rather than get into years and years of debate and permitting process, and then at the end being shut down. So, and we serve a useful purpose in the world. We just have to show people that we are. They just are looking at our past behavior and saying they don't approve of that.
Right.
So change behavior.
Do you see that happening, not just within your own operation, what you're doing? Are you, because I know you go to conferences, you talk to a lot of people, Rob. Are you talking to people that have got the same views as you and are trying to implement some of this new way of mining?
Yes, they're moving that way. And I mean, there's some leaders out there that, I mean, with this shrinking labor pool, there's more emphasis on automation. Autonomous vehicles, because you have to deal with that shrinking pool. That improves safety. If you start changing the energy that's used there, you're getting rid of a concern about global warming, climate change. Downstream water consumption is huge in a number of the areas. So can we find ways in this place in Argentina, about 90% of the province is mountainous, and the rest is, you know, it's agriculture, but it's wasteful in the usage of water. Can we use some of the techniques that were used a millennium ago, where putting aqueducts, covering them, I was in Morocco recently and looked at an aqueduct going through the desert. It was 50 kilometers long,
Wow.
going from a mountain, but it was made over 1,000 years ago.
Is that right? Wow.
Yes. Of course, it was made use slaves, but I mean, it's down about 10 meters below the surface of the desert.
Amazing.
And just transporting water from there, so you don't have the evaporation. I saw something just today, an article came in and they were talking about storing water, say in mountainous, or where you have large seasonal swings, and freezing the water, but freezing them in columns.
Oh.
And there's less surface area, so it doesn't melt as quickly. So you could have these columns of ice that are melting but continue the flow during the dry summer seasons or the early summer. I thought that's a really low-tech way of conserving some water.
And sometimes the simplest ideas are the best.
Yes.
Rob, can we just go back to this ninth largest undeveloped copper mine? Can you just talk
Sure.
to me a little bit more about that? Because when I speak to you, Rob McEwen, and I look at you, we've spoken in the past, I always think gold, my favorite subject, which we'll come on to in a moment. How did you get your hands on this ninth largest undeveloped copper mine, and why?
Oh, all right. Well, McEwen Mining was formed in January of 2012 as a result of merger of two companies, U.S. Gold, that had development properties in the United States and Mexico.
Yep.
And another company called Minera Andes that had a joint venture gold silver mine in southern Argentina and 100% of a copper project, Los Azules, in Argentina.
Okay.
Now, it has about 30 billion pounds of copper in its resources, indicated and inferred. And 5.5 million ounces gold and 191 million ounces silver. It's a large deposit.
Mm-hmm.
It's reasonable grade. And when I looked at it, I went, okay, divide it by if you take the copper and divide it by gold and turn it into a gold equivalent, how many ounces of copper are there for an ounce of gold equivalent?
Yep.
It's about a 60 million ounce gold deposit equivalent. So,
holy moly.
So then you start saying, well, that gets my attention. And then in the PEA, it was, we're going to be producing copper at $1.13 a pound. And when you have copper at 350, 360, you go, well, that's pretty good. And in the PEA, the preliminary economic assessment, it's being updated, but the one that we were working with was going to be producing over 400 million pounds of copper a year. So you get something that's a 36-year life. It's about a 2.4 billion capex, but it pays back in under 4 years. And it's the bottom of the cost curve for the industry. It's in the lowest cost quartile. So I went, all right, let's convert all of that. So that's about 800,000 ounces of gold equivalent at just under $700 an ounce cash costs.
Nice.
So I felt I wasn't totally abandoning my gold. I just had to make copper, do a little alchemy to get it into the copper to gold.
Well, so, and we all know that copper in this new environment, the green technology is the demand supply. There's a gap. It needs to be filled.
Yes. So that's how we got the copper. And then we went through some of the cycles, the price cycles, and we didn't have any encouragement because the copper price dropped so low by 2015. And we started drilling. And then I said in summer of 2021, said, let's get this going. And we were going to have it in a subsidiary of McEwen Mining and finance it separately. And we said, first step, raise $80 million. Okay. And I personally put up 40 million of the 80 we were going to raise. And I thought it'd be a piece of cake to raise the other 40. It took about a year. So in this end of August of 2022. The other 40, well, we had another 42 million came in, and 25 of that came in from an arm of Rio Tinto, their technology arm, Newton Technology. They're doing work for heap leach operations where they feel they can increase the recovery rate and shorten the recovery time significantly. So they were looking at that, and Rio looked at our project and said, well, we should invest in that. Okay. So they became a shareholder. And then just this end of February, beginning of March, we had Stellantis, who is the fourth largest car manufacturer in the world, come in, and they made an investment of 155 million. Well, it was 30 billion Argentinian pesos, which at the official exchange rate is 155 million. So they came in, and then Rio stepped up and upped their investment. So Rio put another 30 million in.
Wow.
So we have Rio in for 14% of the company, Stellantis in for 14%. McEwen Mining, as a result, has reduced from that 68% down that you mentioned earlier to 52%. And then I own just under 14% personally. So, and we're moving this, updating the preliminary economic assessment. We'll have that out in mid-June. And we really wanted it to reflect current costs, because there's been a lot of escalation of costs in the mining industry. We also changed the process from a conventional milling process to a heap leach operation, and cut the water consumption, projected water consumption, by about 90%.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and it'll be an electric mine. All the power there is, we've arranged with the power generator in Argentina that we can get 100% renewable power source. So it's, and then we're working on cutting down all the other areas where people have objections to what mining does.
Is this going to be the poster child for the mining industry going forward? I'm kind of listening, thinking you're going to go 100% renewable. We talked before about how you've got the Steve Jobs coming in and making the environment so good to work in. Is this something, Rob, that might become a way of us showing the world that actually mining is responsible and can do things in a better, more innovative, cleaner, cost-effective way for the world?
Right on the money, Carrie. Right on the money.
I might have to come and have a little trip over there then, Rob. Might have to do.
I'll send you the renderings for the camp and that. It's about a 40. No, it's more than 40 slides, but it looks at the philosophy behind it, the residence built into the side of the hill where you're going to get the maximum sunlight. It's terraced, much like the Incas terraced their gardens. Yep. It's all in there. You have hanging gardens, you have aquaculture, hydroponics. You're growing your own food there to cut out the transportation costs of bringing food up. Your waste is being recycled for growing a number of the plants. It's really quite extraordinary. I really love it, just the design.
I can see you really love it, but are we talking way into the future? What's the sort of timeline? I know you can't give me an exact one, but an approximate.
It's probably 5-6 years out. We're doing our PEA. We hope to have a feasibility completed by early 25. Then there's engineering, then there's permitting, and then there's construction.
And funding.
Oh, and that too.
just a little one on the side there. And government, Argentina, are they very supportive of what you're doing?
Yes, there's a couple of projects in the province right now. Filo mining, high-grade copper deposit, although we're bigger than them and higher copper grade. And Jose Maria, Glencore's in there. Those are both controlled by Lundin Mining. Glencore is in there with their El Pachon project. There are a couple of juniors also in there. Fortescue is exploring in the neighborhood. So yes, Argentina is recognizing they have minerals, and on the other side of the border, Peru and Chile have benefited greatly from developing those, and Argentina's been slow doing it, seeing they certainly have lots of lithium investments right now.
Yeah.
But the province of San Juan is one of the favored places in South America to be investing, according to the Fraser Institute, which looks at political risk. So,
okay. All right. That sounds fascinating. I'm going to really look forward to those renderings coming through to me, Rob. But let's talk gold, my favorite subject.
yes.
As I speak to you today, coming up to the end of May, news has come out of the United Kingdom that the inflation rate has a little bit higher than most people thought. As a result, I think the gold price has pulled back a little bit. Rob, given the number of years you've worked in the gold industry, and a lot of people don't have a long view. They're very closed view on, they look at the gold price one day and the next day and freak out. And I'm like, no, sit back and take a look at the bigger view, bigger picture. I want to talk to you about the macro outlook for gold and your view on inflation, because I know in the past you said inflation is here to stay. It ain't going anywhere.
It's going to get worse. The governments around the world have been irresponsible, fiscally irresponsible.
Yeah.
There's been just massive monetary stimulation. The world's awash with liquidity. And along with that, they compounded it by taking on a lot of debt. And if you look at economic history, those periods where you have what we have today usually don't go very well for people holding local currencies. You have to find a way to protect your wealth, and gold's been one of those stores. And I think we're just at the beginning. And I don't really follow the logic of, if inflation's going up, why gold is going down.
I don't know. I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
I think the commodities are all going down right now. There was talk of China's not recovering as quickly as people thought it would in the first quarter. The interest rates have been pushed up in the US, so money's flowing towards that. There's a belief that maybe the market's a riskier place than it was earlier this year, and so people are moving to cash. And there's an old saying that say, go away in May, sell in May.
Yeah, I know what you sell in May and go away, or something like that.
Yes. And I think we're there right now. And there's just a lot of concerns about the strength or lack of strength of the economy. And there's a liquidation going on right now. I look at this as a good time to buy. I mean, some of the mining stocks the big ones have some dividends right now that look quite attractive, and you have a capital gains aspect to them as well. When you can buy them today at a lower price than they were earlier on.
Are you talking about the Newmonts of this world?
Newmont's, Barracks, and others, yes. Well, Newmont has got some digestion problems, but
just a little one that they've got to digest in the terms of Newcrest. That's what you're talking about, I assume.
That's right.
Okay.
But I've had a $5,000 number for gold in the future, and we got up to 2,000, went down and came back up to 2,000. I just think it's a matter of time before we get there again, and I know a number of people have estimates well beyond that. I just think there's so much money that's been printed, partially in response to COVID measures, and just a sense, well, we've got unlimited money available, and it's just fiscally irresponsible and it's almost criminal when you think it's a form of theft from the citizens of the countries that where the government's been doing that.
Yes, but we don't teach financial I guess, understanding in schools, we go back to the schools and teaching students about economic history, most of the time there's a lack of understanding, and a lack of understanding about printing money is not good for any economy. But Rob,
No.
they're going to keep kicking the can down the road as they have done for the last X number of years. Why would they stop now?
They have no incentive to stop now. They just feel there's an unlimited source. They can just keep printing. Somewhere along the way, it blows up, but we're not there yet.
We're not there yet. Okay. So for those that are listening now, you're saying you need to protect your wealth. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you suggesting that perhaps gold, silver, and those sort of real money assets are a better place than the debasing currencies, whatever currency that is?
Yeah, I think, the precious metals are a good place and timing's good. It might not be the perfect timing, but it's hard to pick the bottom. If we're going to go into a strong gold market, for the conservative, buy something that pays a dividend. For someone who maybe want to mix it up with some juniors because they can have quite explosive growth in value when you get into a bull market for gold. I'd be looking at energy, and I'd be looking at food, because there's with inflation comes higher food costs. So are there either the commodities or someone producing food that's a public company? I just we're going to go hungry.
Yeah, we are. And if we go hungry, there's things you can do to people, humans, but if you hunger is going to create social unrest. And I think that
you look at all the dislocation that's occurred from the geopolitical tensions, the sanctions, the warfare going on in certain areas that are, food baskets of the world. They're all contributing to the lack of resources and nationalization of resources that are going on. Peru, Mexico are saying, well, we want all the lithium for ourselves, and other nations are doing the same thing, restricting who they're going to sell to, who they're going to invite in. And some places need a lot of capital to develop their resources. They're not going to have that access to capital.
Does that concern you with any of your operations around the world, that the potential of nationalization?
Always.
Okay.
In Canada, United States.
Yes. Do you want to go there?
To Canada?
No, as in, do you want to cover that topic of nationalization in Canada?
Oh, we just have a prime minister that's like a kid got his first credit card. They just spend, and they have no sense of the consequences. We've got lots of problems at home that need to be addressed, whether it's waiting times in hospitals or it's homeless. And we should be addressing our problems at home first before we seem to be magnanimous around the world.
It's a view that we have the same here in Australia. We have lots of problems here in Australia, not least the homeless are it's increasing. Our rental prices are beyond so many people's reach, people living out of their cars. The middle class is disappearing, and people living paycheck to paycheck is increasing massively, and that is going to cause big social unrest as we go forward.
Yeah, like Australia, Canada has lots of natural resources. The country is built on natural resources, and we should be speeding that up and ensuring it's done responsibly, but making Canadians wealthier, not poorer.
Well, Rob, if there's anything that you're going to do to get the word out, and there's anything I can do to help I'm passionate about getting people to understand that actually the mining industry is responsible, and that without us, we're not, you're going to have to go back and live in a cave, because we produce things that make this new economy that you all want to live in. So let's park that for a moment, because we are running out of time, and I want to make sure we cover McEwen Mining and what you're doing at the moment with McEwen Mining.
Oh, okay. As you said, we have 3 operating mines. We have a 4th that was operating in Mexico, and we bought a new process plant to get it going, and that'll be it'll take about 10 months to construct the plant, and we'll be starting in the 3rd quarter on that of this year. And it won't be a large producer, but it's economic. Cost would be below $800 an ounce, so be generating a positive cash flow. We just in the last, I should say, in the last 8 months, we've raised for McEwen Copper and some of it for McEwen Mining, a total of 193 million, non-brokered. And with the money that came into McEwen Mining, we just announced we paid down our debt by 39%.
So that, yeah.
We're doing in Timmins, which is an old established gold district, we're going to be doing a decline ramp to a deposit there we call Stock West. And it's bridging. We have one deposit we're mining called Froome, and it'll go for probably the next two years. And then we move over to Stock, and there we can see between Stock and the next deposit about a 10-12 year life at costs around $800 an ounce. And that'll be producing, get up to about 80,000 ounces there.
Okay.
In Argentina, we have a joint venture that contributes about 80,000 ounces attributable to us. We just get a dividend. We don't get the gold.
Okay.
They haven't paid a dividend in a year, but we're hoping it will. And then we have 52% of the copper project, McEwen Copper, and we have a portfolio of royalties on the copper project. I should say on McEwen Copper, we have another copper project called Elder Creek, and Rio's exploration arm, Kennecott Copper, went in, optioned it from us, and they can spend up to $18 million during a 60% interest in that project.
Right.
So we have royalties on Los Azules, on this other copper project, and some in Nevada and around our Argentinian joint venture, where Newmont has their Cerro Negro mine, so we surround that property.
Nice place to be.
Not completely surrounded.
But like, and I guess the reason I wanted to talk about McEwen Mining, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, not financial advice. Do your own research, reach out to the company, and make sure you read quarterlies, etc. But the share price at the moment is not at its all-time highs. And I'm not asking you whether people should be buying your stock at the moment, but from a valuation point of view, it seems to me that it is. And look, lots of executives would say, yes, we're undervalued, but.
Oh, I think we're seriously undervalued.
I just wanted you to expand a little bit, if you could, on that briefly.
I'd be happy to. We went through a series of, I'll call them horrible years, from about 2019 to last year. Mm-hmm. And there were a couple of natural disasters, but it was worse. Our operations failed to deliver on guidance, and we lost so much goodwill in the market. I've never seen it evaporate so quickly. I can understand why it did, because we didn't deliver, but it was painful to see the harm it did to all our shareholders. But we started turning around late last year. And so operations, production's increasing, costs are coming down into a reasonable range. And we've been spending a lot of money on exploration as well. I believe that's very important to keep a mining company going. So since September 1st of last year to yesterday, we were up 167%. Gold was up about, I think, 18%. Copper was up a little around the same. The GDXJ, two indices of junior and senior gold producers, were up a maximum of 54%. So we were outperforming. And I believe that was a combination of our operations turning around, financing our copper project that was sitting there, and our exploration results coming out. We're finding some good gold values very close to where we're going to be starting to ramp underground. So that should pay for a good portion of the ramp. And our balance sheets, we deleveraged it by the reduction of the debt. And I'd like to get it to the point where Goldcorp, I mean, when I left Goldcorp, we had no debt. We had 400 million in cash. We paid a dividend every month, and we had no debt. So
is that your game plan, if you like, at the moment? What's your market cap at the moment on McEwen Mining?
It's about 350 US, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're turning the ship around, and what you're saying is, obviously you said it's undervalued, but as I said, not financial advice, ladies and gentlemen, do your own research. But New York Stock Exchange code is MUX. Rob, before I let you go, you and your wife Cheryl have, I believed, given about 60 million to worthwhile causes, and I believe it's mainly in education and healthcare, from memory. Can I ask the reasons why those sectors, and why you're so passionate about this?
Well, one, I was fortunate enough to be in the position to do it.
Yeah, that helps.
I saw some needs out there. One, just looking at healthcare, and I was looking at the Canadian situation, where we have a population that's aging, and as 80% of the healthcare costs in someone's life occurs when they're over 60 years old. So we have a demographic bulge in the population in Canada. And so healthcare is starting to crowd out a lot of other services the government provides. And it's a little bit like mining. You have a lot of the senior talent in healthcare providers. They're entering retirement age because they're part of that demographic bulge. So you're losing people who address healthcare issues at a time when the demands are becoming more acute. And you're watching the provincial budget. Healthcare is about 48% of the provincial budget in province of Ontario, where I live. And so
sorry, can you just say that again? 47% of the budget is healthcare?
Yes. Now, you're going to get blown out of the water very quickly as the baby boom's going into retirement. And the number of people servicing them, providing healthcare, is shrinking. So because of retirement, because they're all part of that same demographic. And you looked at it and said, well, I've always looked and said, are there alternatives? And back in 2003, the one area that caught the attention of my wife and I was stem cell research and regenerative medicine. So we funded the establishment of what is now known as the McEwen Stem Cell Institute, and started working in a number of areas where regenerative medicine and stem cell research holds out the promise of profoundly changing the delivery of healthcare. Hopefully it could reduce the costs and address a lot of the ills that we currently don't have cures for. So that seemed to me to be a good place to put money that would benefit not only ourselves, because we're part of that aging demographic, but thousands, if not millions of people beyond Canada.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so, I mean, along the way, Bayer Pharmaceutical came along, and one of the areas is taking stem cells, about 1 billion stem cells that they've created, injecting it into a heart of someone who suffered a heart attack. And when you have a heart attack, it creates scar tissue in part of your heart. It'd be like a rugby ball, and one of the seams is scar tissue, and it's really flaccid, and the heart is a pump, and it doesn't work as efficiently. So they're injecting these stem cells, and it's growing muscle tissue where the scar tissue was. So then the pump goes back to working properly.
Wow.
And so then you start thinking that could replace heart transplants, artificial hearts. And then there are areas dealing with type 1 diabetes, and there are clinical trials starting shortly there. So there are a number of areas, and then moving into neurology. And so it's fascinating. It was like, I pictured myself running up a hallway. There's a door at the end I want to go through, and that's sort of my career. But all of a sudden, we put money into healthcare, and some doors opened along the wall in that hall that weren't there before. And you go through them, maybe all these really smart people who are working really hard to keep all of us healthy. And it's much like magic some of the time. So it's sometimes it becomes addictive to put more money in there, because it's showing us a new world, and there's a purpose for the time we've spent digging things out of the ground. So there's a larger benefit. And the other side is in education. One is at a leadership program where it's teaching. It was originally at a boys' school I'd gone to, and then they teach them the fundamentals of accounting, project management. If they need deportment, elocution, they do that. They raise money for profit, not for profit, and it just gives them a leg up. And I thought this, and gives them the confidence to step through the dark threshold into the unknown and embrace opportunity rather than stepping back fearful of going through there. And another one is just, and there's a girls' school that's now getting that same program going in to create more confident ladies coming up.
Nicely balanced there, Rob. Nicely balanced. Well, it's been fantastic, Jane. And by the way, thank you for what you do for education and healthcare. But also, I'd like to keep in touch with you, because I do believe we need better communication and a better understanding for people out there that really don't understand mining, but actually need it as we move into this new world. But Rob, let's just back it up a bit. What advice would you give to the next generation coming through, whether it's in mining, but I think, what advice would you give to our next generation?
Walk into your interviews with passion, knowledge of who you're talking to, and a commitment to make your boss look good.
That would be Mr. McEwen, ladies and gentlemen. Rob, absolute pleasure to chat with you. And as I said at the start, ladies and gentlemen, Rob McEwen is the executive chairman of McEwen Mining, listed on the New York Stock Exchange. The ASX code is MUX. And as Rob has just explained, they had the annus horribilis, as the Queen would say, for the last couple of years, but they're turning the ship around. So make sure you do your own research, but check them out, as well as their other projects. Rob McEwen, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Carrie. Pleasure.